Hello, it's here again. It is that time of year. It's fall, kids have been back to school for a little bit, and the viruses have hit. So let's talk a little bit about managing these acute viruses, these acute illnesses with homeopathy, and in particular, what I'm seeing this year already for fall 2025. Before we jump into the remedies, I think it's really important to note that kids get sick, right? It is normal for kids to get sick, especially the first few years that they are in either daycare or school. In fact, kids during that time frame will get sick anywhere from 6 to 12 times a year. And that can feel like a lot, right? It can feel like they are just constantly battling the next virus that comes along. That is really normal. However, it is still really hard. The majority of illnesses that kids get throughout the year are viruses. And unfortunately, conventional medicine, allopathic medicine, doesn't really have a lot to offer us besides symptom suppression and, in really extreme cases, some antivirals. Now, there are times where symptom suppression is completely appropriate. So I'm not discounting that altogether, but my go-to with these viruses is always homeopathy. My go-to for these viruses is always homeopathy because instead of suppressing symptoms, it actually stimulates the body's ability to heal itself. It is incredibly safe. So this is a vial of homeopathy. Inside this little vial, there are little sugar pellets, and surrounding the sugar pellets is incredibly dilute forms of natural substances. And this dilution is what makes homeopathy so incredibly safe. I am comfortable using homeopathic remedies with newborns all the way to geriatric clients. Homeopathy is super effective. Really, the worst thing that happens is when you choose the incorrect remedy for the individual and nothing happens. They don't react. But especially in these acute illnesses, you should know really quickly. There should be some change in the first 4 to 8 hours of giving a remedy, and certainly a pretty dramatic change within that first 24 hours of giving a remedy. Homeopathy is based on the idea of like cures like. So we are using substances that in their crude form, their high dose form, create symptoms in a healthy person, but in their dilute form actually stimulates the body to heal those symptoms. So let's take coffee. It's kind of the classic example. Large amounts of coffee, you may be a little anxious, jittery, you may not be able to sleep. But in the homeopathic form, so this really dilute form, it's called coffea. And in that form, it is used for people who are super anxious, jittery, and they're not able to sleep. There are hundreds of homeopathic remedies, and so homeopathy is incredibly individualized. We're looking at the person's symptoms as well as the symptoms of the remedy to really make the best fit. And for these illnesses, there might be common themes that you see, like for example, a little foreshadowing, what we're going to talk about today. I'm really commonly seeing remedies like aconite and belladonna being needed right now, or people reacting to those remedies right now because the onset of symptoms is so fast in this virus. However, everybody presents a little bit differently. So for one illness, there might be 100 different remedies that are used. It really depends on the person's individual symptoms. So this is just a super brief kind of introduction to homeopathy, a little bit of a crash course into using homeopathy to treat acute illnesses. And as we're doing this, what we're talking about is something called keynote prescribing. So it's kind of quick and dirty homeopathy. We're taking the main general symptoms of the person and the main general symptoms of the remedy, and we're trying to find the best fit. If you go to a homeopath or a naturopathic doctor that specializes in homeopathy, you're going to find that it's a lot more involved process because there are so many remedies to go through. And because we're doing this kind of quick and dirty method today, or talking about doing this kind of quick and dirty method, you might find that there is some trial and error involved, and that's fine. So say you give a remedy to somebody or you take a remedy yourself and you're not feeling anything, there's no change within that first couple of hours, and you redose, and again, there's no change, don't be afraid to try the next remedy, the next best remedy. And just because I have to say it, this is for educational purposes only. Please check with your doctor before taking anything, before giving anything for your child. And what we're talking about today are the homeopathic preparations of these substances. We are not talking about the crude doses or the herbs. Okay, let's get into it. Now, these, again, this is just a handful of remedies that I am commonly prescribing right now or commonly seeing kiddos with these viruses need. But of course, it might be different where you are. And as we get further into flu season and the sick season, what kids need may be different. But here is a good place to start. So these first two, let me say what I'm seeing commonly right now is I'm seeing these like high fevers that spike really, really fast. And because kiddos are having these high fevers that spike really, really quickly, and the illness itself just seems to come on suddenly, aconite and belladonna are two of the remedies I am seeing the most. So let's start with aconite. So aconite comes on super fast. I like to say it comes in like a storm and leaves like a storm. With aconite, the fevers are typically up there. They're typically pretty high and again, come on suddenly. You might see hot, dry skin. Typically the face is red and like bright red. And sometimes it turns pale if somebody's like laying down and then sits up, but typically you have like those really red cheeks. Now, somebody who might react to aconite tends to be restless. Now, again, they don't need all of these symptoms. You just are looking for like the main gist of what's going on as you're doing this kind of keynote prescribing. But people who react well to aconite typically tend to be restless. They tend to be chilly, so like kind of ice cold chills as they have a fever. They can be sweaty and really thirsty, and thirsty typically for colder water. There can be some anxiety. Somebody may feel really anxious about their current illness, and it tends to be out of proportion to what the illness actually is. So in the past, I've reacted well to aconite for like a cold, and I was convinced that I was going to like die from this cold. Clearly, it was a cold, so it's really, really, the anxiety was really out of proportion to what the actual illness was. There might be a midnight aggravation with aconite, so you might see either the illness come on, middle of the night, all of a sudden, kiddo wakes up screaming with this high fever. You might think of aconite. There also can be like a cold, dry wind exposure prior to the start of the illness. My oldest reacted well to aconite a couple of weeks ago. And he was out in the morning playing a football game. It was kind of windy. And then he went to a birthday party and seemed totally healthy. I was fine. And leaving the birthday party, all of a sudden he was sick. He was super congested, had a sore throat, and it came out of the blue. So you have a couple of those aconite symptoms there. You have the exposure to the cold wind prior to the illness. You have this illness that just comes on suddenly, and I mean so suddenly. We were literally walking from the birthday party to the car, and all of a sudden he got congested. So symptoms that come on that quickly, you want to think about aconite. The other remedy that we're going to talk about that also has these high fevers, come on suddenly, is belladonna. So with belladonna also comes on super suddenly. If there's any pain, like a headache associated with it, it's usually like a throbbing pain. Belladonna tends to be thirstless, so they don't, if they react well to belladonna, they typically don't have a lot of thirst. And again, like aconite, have a tendency to be hot and dry, really red skin, maybe like glittery, dilated pupils, but no sweating associated with it. Interestingly, those that react well to belladonna typically are better with warmth and better wrapping up. So if they have a headache, they might want to like wrap up their head. So with these illnesses, if you have a fever that seems to come out of nowhere and they're red, fever spikes pretty high, of these remedies that we're talking about today, the two that you want to differentiate between are aconite and belladonna. And some of the ways that you can tell the difference there, aconite is going to be thirsty and belladonna is not. There might be some sweating with aconite and no sweating with belladonna. And with aconite, they don't have that better with warmth, better kind of wrapping up those symptoms there as well. And with aconite, you're more likely to have that restlessness, that anxiety, the feeling really cold too. So those are just some ways that you can differentiate between those two remedies, because honestly, for these acute illnesses, they can seem really similar. Okay, let's talk about ferrum phos next. My youngest, who got sick last week, ended up reacting pretty well to ferrum phos. They also may have high fevers, but these fevers don't typically come on as fast as aconite and belladonna. This is the remedy, ferrum phos is the remedy to have on hand if there's a fever, but there's nothing else going on. So you don't really see any other symptoms. There's nothing else that's really super characteristic or stands out to you in the case. If that's what's going on, you would get ferrum phos. Also, if there's like a nosebleed accompanying a fever, you might go there. Bryonia is the next remedy that I'd like to talk about. Unlike aconite and belladonna, that remember it comes on really fast, bryonia comes on much more slowly. There's a dryness with bryonia, so you might complain about a dry mouth. Everything kind of seems dry. It's not like their eyes, their nose, their throat. It just feels dry. Might have a red face. Again, you can have a pretty high fever with bryonia. It's just going to come on a little bit more slowly than aconite and belladonna. And also you might expect it, or somebody might have a headache with the fever. Bryonia tends to be thirsty, but they want to be still. So with bryonia, you might have somebody that is thirsty and saying they want to drink, but like they don't want to reach over and grab the water bottle and actually drink the water. And that is because their symptoms are worse with the slightest motion. So let's say somebody has a headache with their acute illness. Every time they move their head, that headache gets worse. And that you might actually find that they are better with pressure. So for example, if they have pain in the forehead, hold their forehead, that is better. But it's not actually the pressure that's better, it's that it's keeping them still. Might have joint pain associated with their illness. And again, that joint pain is going to be worse with even the slightest motion. And people who react to bryonia tend to be super irritable, so super cranky. So again, bryonia, high fever, comes on more slowly than some of the remedies that we've talked about. Maybe have some pains, aches and pains, joint pain, headache with the fever, and even the tiniest bit of motion is going to make those aches and pains worse. Okay, next we have pulsatilla. Pulsatilla is just a remedy to have on hand if you have kids. And if you are postpartum or have any kind of PMS type symptoms, pulsatilla might be a great remedy for you to keep in your medicine cabinet. Now with pulsatilla, the kind of the emotional symptoms with these cases typically really stand out. So if we're talking about a kid, they might be super weepy and clingy and just kind of they seem pitiful, right? You just want to hug them and keep them close and comfort them. And they're typically better with that consolation. With these viruses that are going around, they can feel chilly, and those chills might wander. So they might wander around the body. So even though they can be chilly, especially with these acute illnesses, they are always, always worse with warmth. And that's warmth with anything. So a warm room, a warm compress. With earaches or ear infections that react well to pulsatilla, typically if you put like a warm compress on it, that will make the pain worse. And they tend to be better with cool, open air. If it's a kiddo that is little, like a toddler, they often want to be carried or rocked, but really gently. So they like the slow movement. If they have a runny nose or any discharges anywhere, it can be thick, yellow, kind of green, and creamy. And the other symptom that I'm seeing right now, so I'm not seeing a ton of coughs with what's going around here, but pulsatilla type cough is going to be loose in the morning and dry at night. So somebody has a dry cough all night, they get up in the morning and start to hack some stuff up. It has that kind of rattly, loose cough. You would think about pulsatilla. So again, with pulsatilla, their mental emotional state really tends to change, and they can be clingy and weepy and just want to be loved on and snuggled. Always, always worse with warmth. Any of the symptoms that they have, whether it's fever or their mood or anything, worse with warmth. Okay, then we have nux vomica. Kind of the predominant nux vomica symptom is that they are chilly, 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 especially with these acute illnesses. They are so cold and they have to be covered. So they might need to be in bed, like covers pulled all the way up, even if it's warm in the room, and they might feel so cold. And then they might take the covers off and immediately feel that cold, feel kind of that chill again. There can be some heat in the face. They may feel a little warm, especially in the face, but that chilliness usually predominates. If they have a runny nose or some congestion with their illness, it's typically worse, so it runs more in a warm room, and usually better in a cool air. So it becomes more like congested in cool air, and it runs more in a warm room. Also tends to run more during the day and be a little bit more stuffed up again at night. There might be frequent sneezing, and kiddos that tend to react well to nux vomica can be irritable, so crabby and cranky. So like we talked about bryonia type irritable, they can be irritable as well. Usually really sensitive to noise, to odor, to light. There may be some sleep disturbances, waking in the middle of the night, waking around 3 a.m. And if there's some GI involvement, they might feel like they're going to vomit and it just doesn't come up. So they go, oh, I'm going to vomit, and it doesn't come. May even say, oh, I would just feel so much better if I would vomit. That's a big nux vomica symptom. Okay, so we talked about what I'm seeing with like your fever, that kind of aspect of this illness, kind of the runny nose, cough. Now, some kiddos, I'm seeing some GI involvement right now. So there's two remedies that I want to touch on for that include this GI involvement. Again, not an exhaustive list, but a good jumping off point. And those are arsenicum and phosphorus. So arsenicum is also one of the top, or maybe probably the top remedy for food poisoning. So another good one to just have in your toolkit. There can be vomiting and diarrhea, either separately or at the same time. And it can happen immediately after drinking. So somebody takes a sip of water, immediately after they take a sip of water, they vomit everywhere. Or immediately after they take a sip of water, they have to run to the bathroom with diarrhea. And usually they're really thirsty too, which doesn't help this, right? And they want typically small sips of water. Arsenicum can have some burning pains. So these illnesses that I'm seeing right now, There's a lot of throat pain. If the throat pain is burning, and that burning pain is better with warmth, which seems a little counterintuitive, right? But if better with warm drinks, that can point to it's a great arsenicum symptom. Like aconite, which we talked about, arsenicum can also be really restless. They tend to have like a weakness to them about them too, especially if they've had some diarrhea, some vomiting. They might be weak, and so there can be some anxiety there as well. Not so much the anxiety that we talked about with aconite, with like the I'm going to die from this illness, although there may be some anxiety about health there too, but more anxiety about the dark, anxiety about being alone, things like that. And then worse after midnight. So between 12 and 2 a.m., somebody wakes up, has some vomiting, diarrhea at that time, or their fever gets higher at that time. Think about arsenicum as well. And finally, I told you this is quick and dirty, let's talk about phosphorus. So phosphorus is the other remedy that I wanted to mention with GI involvement. So with vomiting and nausea and diarrhea, you would compare arsenicum and phosphorus. Phosphorus wants company and consolation. They do not want to be alone. A big fear of the dark, fear of being alone. So similar to arsenicum, right? That has those as well. Phosphorus, maybe even more of that fear of being alone. So if your child doesn't have like a fear of the dark or fear of being alone, and they get sick and then start to have that, they don't want to be left alone at night. They want you with them in the bed at night. I would think about one of these remedies. They also have vomiting and diarrhea like arsenicum, but unlike arsenicum, it's not immediately after drinking. It tends to be about 20 minutes. So if you give a child with some GI involvement in this illness, some water, they take a sip, they vomit immediately, think about arsenicum. If it takes about 20 minutes or so, takes a little bit, and then they vomit, think about phosphorus. Okay, that was it. That was our quick and dirty kind of brief overview of just some of the remedies that I'm seeing right now. Again, there are hundreds of remedies for these acute illnesses. These are just a handful of what I'm seeing. If you are looking for more, want to go into more detail, or even want more of the theory behind homeopathy, more instruction on using homeopathy, head over to my website, drkatepurvis.com. I have a ton of free resources there, and even a crash course, a kind of an introduction to homeopathy that goes more into what it is, how you use it, when you can use it, things like that. Okay, on my website, you can also schedule an appointment. If you are watching this in the fall of 2025, I have $100 off my initial intake. Right now for homeopathy, use the coupon code FALL when you check out, and stay safe. There's a lot going on already, and we're just in the beginning of this season. Remember, it's normal for your kid to get sick frequently. Their immune systems are doing their job, and you can support them. And remember to take care of yourself too, right? You are super, super important in this equation, and kind of the cornerstone for keeping your family healthy. All right, take care.